This is the worst podcast ever by Dean Scofield. This podcast is for a capstone project at Brigham Young University, Idaho. And just a quick background about my life since this is the first podcast. I'm a senior here at Brigham Young University, Idaho, and I'm studying international studies that I'm looking into going into teaching. And I found what better way to start teaching and to exercise what I really want to do than by starting a podcast. The main purpose of this podcast is to learn how to adapt to the German culture and how to speak the language. And by doing so, I'm going to give a brief history about my life up to this point. I served as a missionary for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And for those who are listening who might not know exactly what that is, we're commonly referred to as Mormons. For further background, we are called to serve domestically or international missions and are assigned a language for said region as well. This is to help bring the message of the church to that specific region. I was fortunate enough to go and be called to Germany, and I lived there for 2 years, and I shared the message of the church, and I lived every day as a German would. Because of this, German became an acquired taste. And after I came home, I found the best things that I'm good at are teaching German and asking way too many questions. So I figured, why not implement all three? The outline how this podcast is going to work is that it's going to be strictly for the capstone project because I have way too many interests, but I don't have enough time to do it. That being the case, one of the main topics of discussion is to have Germans think that you're not weird. I grew up in an American bubble, but I never really lived outside the United States until I went to Germany at the beginning of 2003. I came to the country with a bunch of culture shock, and I had no idea what was going on half the time because everything was in German and everyone was speaking German. And I was, at this point, what I felt like a really lonely American. I was fortunate enough not to be on my own, but these people were inexperienced like myself. That being the case, some of my influence for this podcast really comes from my mistakes and learning experiences to help whoever you may be to learn that Germany isn't just a culture about Wiener Schnitzels, cars, World War II history, and the fact that Germans have no humor. Rather, that I hope to establish that there is a culture that comes from their attitudes towards life, and most of these comes from their philosophers and the way that their language is structured. It's also important to point out that the basic stereotype of a German is that they aren't always drunk and always don't have a beer in their hand. I lived in the areas of Germany where that really wasn't a norm as well. I lived in Berlin for about 3.5 months, and I started my time in Minden, which is in the area of Hanover, and then I actually moved over to Berlin. Then I moved to Bremen, which is actually upstream from Minden, give or take a few kilometers, and around Hamburg. After my experience in Bremen, I moved to Halle, which is where the musician Handel was born. And not too far from Halle is actually Eisleben, which is where Martin Luther was born as well. I then ended my time in Germany not too far away from Minden in a town called Bielefeld. But if you're like me and several other people, it's also referred to as Liebefeld, which is a play on words because Liebe actually means love in German. Throughout this duration of this project, I will be bringing on guests for interviews, and these are friends of mine who have experienced what it's like being an American living in Germany as well. They come from different backgrounds and have a myriad of experiences about what it's like to live in Germany and the surrounding area. These topics and experiences vary from people who have had the same experience I did as living as a missionary, and from those who have gone there for school reasons, or for people who have lived there for military reasons. And on that note, I'm going to end the episode. This is the first time I've actually had an experience making a podcast, and so feel free to comment or share or whatever you like, whatever people do here. I'm here to keep the quality as good as possible and to make sure that my podcast is up to date and really good. So with that, I'm going to end the episode. I'll see you next time.